not the water district.
Mhm. This is
Judge Evans, we can hear you. You might want to mute for your conversation there.
We are live streaming, Judge, I believe.
All right. It is Monday, March 27th of 2023. The time is 2:07 p.m. and I'm calling to order the meeting of the Far West Texas Regional Public Defender Office Oversight Committee. Present with us today from the committee, myself, Mr. Ortiz, let's see, Judges Hennington, Evans, McKenzie, and Urias. I don't see Judge Urias, but I know that they are connected. I can see his room. We also have our representative of TIDC, and we have Michelle Moore. Ms. Loy, is the OCA a voting member of the board?
According to the bylaws, Judge, yes.
Okay, then we also have Megan Lavoie here as well, which means we do have a quorum. So let's go ahead then and proceed with number 3 on our agenda, which is approval of the minutes of December 6th, 2022 oversight meeting. Those were circulated earlier today. Hopefully everyone's had a chance to review them. And if so, I would entertain a motion. Go ahead, unmute there, Judge Evans.
I so move to approve the minutes.
Motion to approve. Do I have a second?
I second.
All right, Ms. Lavoie has seconded. Do we have any discussion, any changes, corrections, amendments to the minutes before we call for the vote? Hearing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor of the motion indicate so by saying aye, please.
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? All right, motion carries. The minutes are approved. Number 4, update on the SMU research study on misdemeanor appointments. Who is going to take it away?
Judge, I invited Andrew Davies to give a short presentation as an update. I believe I've given him the power to share screen because I think he's got some things he'd like to show us. For information for the board, because we've got several new members, SMU has been doing a study about misdemeanor appointment rates and effect on outcomes in cases, jail populations, and other related issues. And all 5 counties signed a memorandum of understanding with SMU last fall to participate in that. Mostly they're looking at public records, but also interviewing some county employees related to record keeping. So Mr. Davies, or Dr. Davies, is with the SMU Law School at the Deason Center, and he's been the one spearheading this. And Shelby Peck, who is also on your screen, has been the one, I think it's fair to say, is doing all the grunt work. So Professor Davies, or Dr. Davies, if you would like to unmute and speak.
Thank you, James. It's a pleasure to be here, and we certainly won't take any more of our than the 5 minutes that we've been allocated, because we want to get out of the way for your important substantive work. But it is a great pleasure to be here and to meet some of you for the first time. Some of you we've been in your courts for a few months, and James is quite correct that Shelby has been doing not only the grunt, but also the largest body and the most important work, which is she is collecting our data. James described our project quite correctly. We're very interested in systems for appointing counsel and the impact that they have on jail populations. And to that extent, I requested the permission to share the screen so that I could actually show you some of our early results. This will not take very long. But these, I'm about to share a graph on the screen that looks like a big plate of spaghetti. There are lines going everywhere. I don't want it to be overwhelming. This is the only thing I'm going to show you. But what this is showing actually is it's showing people as they go through the criminal justice process. They start at the left. The left column is the moment of magistration. The central column is the moment of arraignment, when a case comes from magistration into county court. And the right column is the moment of when the case is disposed. And you can see what these data are doing are dividing people into whether they have a public defender, an appointed counsel, they've retained their own counsel, or in the red if they have no counsel at all. These data are not from a Far West Texas county. They're from none of your counties. And consistent with the commitment that we make in all of our research. We don't identify which county they're actually from. But I wanted to show them to you simply because they show you a little bit of what we're hoping to do with the data in all the counties. What this graph allows us to do, obviously, is track through how many people are getting counsel at different stages in the case. And if I highlight briefly this group, what this shows us about this county that's particularly interesting is that at magistration, you've got a large number, 129, that apparently all waived counsel. But by the time you get to arraignment, you've got, you can see 10 people at the top who ended up with appointed counsel and 20 who ended up with public defenders. This is an interesting instance of a case where the judge in the county court was actually reassessing the financial eligibility of a lot of people. And as a result, a lot of the people who hadn't been assigned counsel at the point of magistration were then getting it at the point of arraignment. It's only one county and it's only one court, but what I wanted to do was show you that, because it shows you how using these kinds of data, you can kind of understand the ways that cases are flowing through the system and what it is that's causing people to get counsel at different times. It's a lot of fun to play with this graph. I can even share the link if you'd like to play around with it yourself, but it would be quite a distraction, I promise, because it's very distracting. Anyway, that may have been just the right amount of information. I won't share any more. I'm hoping that it's tantalizing. As I say, what I'm hoping we can do is, using the data from every county, see how people flow through the system, how and when they actually get counsel. I would tell you, if it matters, that there aren't other research projects in the country that have done this before, showing obtaining counsel as a kind of a process over time. And then the next step, as James said, is to look at how that interacts with how often people are going to jail and how their cases are ending up, how quickly they're being disposed, and things like that. So thank you for your time. Be happy to take any questions either at this moment or at another time. And as soon as we move on, we'll exit the meeting and participate as viewers through YouTube.
And Dr. Davies, you have completed or gotten close to completing a lot of document review from 2 of the counties. Is that correct?
That's quite correct. Yes. Yes.
That's Brewster and Presidio County.
Yes.
And I think, how has been your cooperation and interaction with the clerk's offices and the jail staff in those counties?
Oh, excellent. And I would say even better than I expected to a great extent. We've discovered that what we need to do is get data first from the clerks, obviously, to understand county court, also often from JPs or in one case, a county attorney to get the magistration information, and the jails also to be able to look up people in their systems and see when they came in and out of jail. We do this by going on the ground and into those places, and people have been welcoming, and they've just allowed us to look through their files and their computer systems. So we're extremely grateful for that. And unless people allow us just to see the jail records, to see the magistrations where people are filling out those financial applications, unless people allow us to see those things, then we can't construct these data sets and we can't do this kind of analysis. So it's been absolutely critical, and we've just been very gratified and to be taken in really as guests in a lot of these counties. We do try to be very good guests. We, as I say, don't disclose which county we're getting information from and so on. We obviously never disclose the names of defendants and other people involved. And also, to the extent that people allow us in to see their files, we will do the work of retrieving those files. In the 2 counties we've been at so far, we have just been fortunate that people have allowed us to situate ourselves in a corner of an office and sit there for days, sometimes, Shelby in this case, just looking up one file after another, one file after another. And with that kind of welcome, we can really be assured of success. So we've been enormously grateful for the welcome that we've been given.
Any questions, anyone? Well, I want to thank you, Dr. Davies, for joining us, and Ms. Peck as well. Keep up the good work. We're really looking forward to seeing your flow chart of our counties and doing some compare and contrast and see where all of us can improve, or where maybe we're setting the standard. So we're looking forward to seeing your results.
Thank you, Judge.
All right, thank you both. Let's move on. And the 2 of you are excused. Good to see you both. All right, next up, we have a chief's report on caseloads, case standards, budgeting, etc. The chief's report is in your meeting packet that you should have received by email. I don't have jump to tabs, do I? I sure do. It's the second tab under chief's report. I'm going to turn it over to Mr. McDermott and let him go through it and tell us what he wants to tell us.
Judge, thank you. I was going to start with a little bit of history because Judge, you and Judge Arias are the only members of the board who were here when the program was started in 2017. In 2017, Judge Ferguson worked with the Indigent Defense Commission in Austin to get funding for this program. And Judge Arias was obviously an important part of that. Culberson County, if all of you remember, is our fiscal agent. So we are all employees of Culberson County. Officially, we started in 2017. The funding came for October 1st. I was hired and started on salary that day on October 1st. And just so you know where we started, I think about when TIDC uses some of their planning study issues to determine staffing. On paper, it looked like we were staffed for 3 lawyers and a secretary to begin with. But that was a chief who has a lot of non-case related duties. And that my salary at that time was set for $90,000, which is, I think, the lowest of anybody that they've got going as a chief public defender in the state. The felony position was originally posted at $72,500 and was envisioned to that person be able to have a private practice. So really that was also, while I treated that as needing to carry a full caseload, it was somebody who was working about half time, and then a misdemeanor lawyer. So on paper, it looked like we were funded for 2 lawyers and 2 felony lawyers, and a misdemeanor lawyer. In practice, we were really fully funded for 1 full-time felony position. We started taking cases 75 days after I was appointed to this position. Now, Judge Ferguson, I see is smiling, and he's remembering the conversation, which really involved, I don't remember if it was by text or by phone call, but it really involved Judge Ferguson calling me around December 1st and saying, you're going to take cases on December 15th, right? At which point I didn't feel like there was really a question there. And so I started taking cases on December 15th. We had the office space here in Brewster County. We did not have any furniture. We did not have any computers. We did not have any supplies. We did not have a database. We did not have any employees. I showed up to that docket alone with, and I believe got 15 felony appointments that day in sort of a fire hose introduction to West Texas. Interestingly enough, Mr. Chambers was at that docket, but he was not my employee. Everybody should know that in a surprise twist of fate, Mr. Chambers showed me proper deference at that docket and offered me the chair at council table. My belief was at the time that our salaries were way too low. Our funding was way too low. That came out about a year later when TIDC contacted me that said that we had overspent on just about every category except for salaries. And we did a wholesale budget revision in the fall of 2018. My memory at that time was that I believe that there were salaries that would need to be set that were at appropriate levels in addition to the financial categories. The response at the time from Austin was that we should focus on incremental, which was at that point, the suggestion was less than a COLA. I was also told in those discussions that COLAs would not be really considered by the TIDC board as part of our ongoing funding. So what we did at that time was we increased my salary, we increased Paul's salary. He continued to keep a private practice. And we moved forward, continuing to take cases. We added soon after that an investigator. Soon after that, we added the social worker, who I think everybody has had contact with at some point, who's on our courts here. And then COVID hit. And I think the rhetoric around the state is that everything stopped during COVID. This is the part where Judge Ferguson is supposed to start smiling again, because we did not. In fact, I believe it was 2 weeks after COVID started, we had our first Hudspeth County docket with over 50 cases on that docket. I got a lot of pushback from the defense bar in general across the state. I got pushback from policy people across the country. I got pushback from my office, Mr. Chambers included, who believed that this was an impossible task, it could not be done and should not be done. If Judge Ferguson remembers from that first docket, because I believed that it needed to be done and we needed to move these cases, I handled all 50 cases that were on that docket myself. I decided that it was going to happen. The result has been that I think that all of the counties, by hook or by crook, all the counties were able to meet their CGIS numbers this past year, which is the first one that fully reflected, that started to reflect the COVID backlogs. Around the state, people have talked about there being COVID backlogs. My office continued to work entirely through COVID at 100%. There are public defenders' offices around the country that still have employees who are not going into the office. We have been working 100% since 2 weeks after COVID started.
Mr. McDermott, if I can jump in real quick, just so they know, for the county judges, since January the 1st of 2020, so a month or so before the lockdown, until January the 1st of this year, our case disposition rate in felony cases is well over 200% in all 5 counties combined. We're at 700 something percent, 748, I think it is, in Hudspeth County. But all of the counties, our disposition rate is 200%. Megan would know better than I would, but I'm not aware of a court through the entirety of the pandemic that has the level of disposition rate of felonies as the 394th. And of course, the vast majority of those were handled by the Far West Texas Regional Public Defender Office. I think their number is 90% of 75% of the felony cases are represented by this department and this office. And with their efforts and willingness to go along with my foot on the gas, and some would say maybe on their necks, we have plowed through and kept all of your counties over 100% in felony disposition rates. So big kudos and commendation for their department for doing something that really almost no one else, no other public defender office in the state has accomplished. So sorry for jumping in, Mr. McDermott, but go ahead.
Thank you, Judge. Related to that, before COVID and after things started opening up again, we continue to have trials. And this office has never filed a motion to continue on any trial setting that we've had since we opened. In fact, there have been trials that have been continued, and they've all been continued on the state's motion, never on the defense motion. My commitment to the courts has been that when we get a trial setting and we schedule it with the court coordinators, that we show up and we're ready and we try the case. And I think that is also unusual among public defenders' offices and unusual among the bar. I know civil cases that have lingered on for years because of continuances by the parties. In general, I think that the answer that since I came here to this office to open it in 2017, the answer from this office has continually been yes. We will have our trials. We will show up at dockets. We've missed one docket in 5.5 years. And that was because I got sick on the way to Culberson County, on the side of the road, kind of sick. And that is the only docket that we missed. There are only 2 things I believe that we have said no to as an office since we opened. And one, we were approached by TIDC to be involved in the state response on the defense side to OLS. I said no. And I said no because my commitment was to these 5 counties to move the cases here and not be involved in things outside the 5 counties. I And I was also approached by TIDC to embed a legal aid lawyer from Texas Rio Grande Legal Aid in our office as a civil lawyer. I also said no to that. Texas Rio Grande Legal Aid has an office here in Alpine. And the model of my office, which I think each one of the judges here has seen, is that we always show up and we're always ready. And I could not have, in my mind, a lawyer in my office who was on a specific grant who was not able to participate in the full range of things that we were doing in this office. And so I said no to that. I will give you a little contrast before moving on to my report. We have a related agency that is run out of Tom Green County to our north. It is our closest peer organization. If you remember, my salary started off was at $90,000. The salary that was set there for the chief public defender was $150,000. I took cases in 75 days in San Angelo. They waited until over 8 months before they took cases. They received COLAs on the first day that they took cases. They were open for 8 months and got pay adjustments for COLAs before they'd taken a single case. That was in June, early June of 2022. They have added to their service area, and they've added on Abilene and surrounding 3 counties around Abilene. They have also already told the district judge in Abilene that they are not going to take the full amount of cases that they were contracted to take or agreed to take when they opened. Paul and I visited that office in February. Felony lawyers in that office right now, because they've not been taking they started taking cases in June and they stopped taking cases in October because they met their caseload guidelines. That office, when we were there in February, their felony lawyers were somewhere between 50 and 60 cases on their felony docket each. That compares to Paul and me, who combined have around, I can't remember what I said in my report, 900 felony cases. I will say this. Paul and I, in particular, have worked hard to make this work. There have been costs involved in this. Paul shut down his private practice, and when he did, I believe that was at a financial loss. I believe that was him subsidizing this office with his income from his private salary in order to make his ends meet. I also sold a house in Austin, and I realized as I was preparing for this meeting that I spent all that money to help supplement the work here of this office as well, or a good portion of it. The personal cost, in order to keep up with the pace of the numbers I put in the report, in 5.5 years at this job, I've taken about 2 weeks of vacation. And I've taken no comp time. Any of the time that I've overspent on working for trials or other issues, I've not taken. And there's an easy reason why, because the work needed to be done. And we didn't have the staffing to get it done. And in the end, the clients matter. And so I couldn't leave. That's not just me. I'm not there to just self-aggrandize. My office is also working towards its end right now. Everybody is tired. We are overcrowded. People are doing more jobs than they were supposed to do, I think. And that's sort of the situation the office is in. And that is not to mention the thing that I think almost everybody here on this call knows. None of the things in my report take into account the emotional toll that the threats and whispers from several of the sheriffs in our region have had on me and Paul. We're aware. I was in a meeting personally where Sheriff West accused me of bribery, accused me of other crimes, and told me that I needed to start playing ball in order to set bonds appropriately, because the bond companies were not making enough money. Paul and I have heard from several sources, not just one and not just two, that 3 of the sheriffs in our region have been talking about us, that we need to be careful, that we need to watch out if we're stopped. These are important issues, and really affect the morale and the ability to get the work done, but that's not reflected in the report. I have had people tell me, also in the system, that the sheriffs are just talking like sheriffs, and sometimes they talk big and sometimes they're just joking. I don't think that my life and safety, or the life and safety of my employees, are a joke. And that's where we're at. So on to my report. We have somewhere between 1,250 and 1,400 open cases. You might think that's a large range, and I think it is too. It's because we don't have time to do the database work in order to get the cases closed and do proper reporting. So that is our best guess, is somewhere between 1,250 and 1,400 open cases. We have the open felony position, which I believed 18 months ago would help solve an issue. Judge Arias worked with me in order to get the grant application done. That was not heard in Austin until last summer. I said at the time in June of last summer that getting that approved then was already going to put us behind. And we have not, and I think some of you on the call, and I would do that in an executive session if you want to know more about why that position has not had an adequate person to fill it, but it hasn't. I believe that some of those things, that some reasons are things that are true for all of us. We're remote, we're far away. You know, I've interviewed people over the phone and who have told me that as long as they've got an HEB, they can live anywhere. And then I have to tell them that the nearest HEB is 2.5 hours away. And then they end the interview voluntarily. One person went as far as say, well, at least there'll be a Target, because they had Googled that there was a Target in Marathon. Not realizing that they should have done more, which also maybe indicated to me that they wouldn't have been a good match for this work if that's all they had done. But we talked about, and I laid out in my report in December, and I reproduced for some of the new members of this board, what I think some of the recruiting and retention issues are. We can't change where we are, but I do think that finances and caseload are the things that are important and can be addressed. I will say this: other offices, including San Angelo, and offices that are have planning studies by TIDC, use TIDC caseload standards. I've outlined those standards in the report. Those are based on case closings. None of the offices I've spoken to use them in that way. San Angelo, I want to be clear, I'm not advocating that we follow the model that they're doing in San Angelo. I believe their case handling is not, I would not enforce that from my office. I believe that's too low. But most of these other offices I'm talking to are dealing with it in some form or fashion, mostly in a loose way, on case intakes rather than case closings. In most cases, they are weighing those in some way that is not just on case closings, but it's about some sort of intuitive workload analysis, which obviously gets strange because it has no empirical basis, is hard to enforce, and is hard to question. What I have done in the major part of the report is review what is the upcoming report that's being put out by the American Bar Association, that quantifies types of cases, not by level of offense, but by type of case. It was done as a survey of, I believe, about 10 states. And the work that was actually being performed by appointed lawyers in those states. I have laid out the numbers of our actual caseload. I believe that our caseload is about 55,000 hours worth of work, discounted for various reasons I think are worthwhile, namely we don't know exactly what cases we've got open right now, as well as there's a lot of duplication of hours that can happen because, for example, we don't go to court for one docket, we go to court for one case, we go to docket for, 25 cases. That I believe a reasonable starting idea of what hours worth our caseload is under that standard is somewhere around 49,000 hours. I'll remind everybody that the CGIS numbers, which is really how y'all are measured and how your grant funding is controlled, look at cases closed over a 3-year period as a percentage, 90% rate over the case openings. And I believe, Judge, that's done in some sort of retroactive 5-year look back. I can't remember the exact mechanics. I believe that if we looked at the numbers that were produced by the ABA compared to our actual caseload or estimated caseload, that for us to be able to, I believe, provide representation in an adequate way to the counties under those standards, which is obviously one of several standards out there, under those standards would require 9 lawyers. Recognizing that probably about 80% of my time at this point is management and supervision and grant organization and working with the auditor's office. And Paul's time is probably about 50% non-case related. So I believe that's under those standards, that would be what would be required in order to continue to take cases at an intake. I have reviewed various other options and believe that at this point, we would need to fill the open position and have 2 additional felony lawyers and additional supportive staff in order to, I think, to at least just try and keep up. I know that questions, and Judge Ferguson has often looked at unindicted cases as a measure of what's going on and what workload actually is. I will point out that over 1/3 of our current caseload has been appointed to us in the last 12 months. So that's where we're at. And I think that I've laid out the other part of it is salaries. I've laid out what I think sustainable salaries might start to look like. This budget, I believe, is our budget meeting is in May and TIDC board meetings in June. And that's why I wanted to have this meeting now. And I believe Mr. Burkhart needs to be off in about 5 minutes. And so he might obviously have some things to add to this conversation. I'll make sure he has an opportunity to do so.
Thank you, James. Can you all hear me?
Yes,
Yes,
sir.
we can.
Okay. Oh, good. Yeah, so I mean, a couple of things that James brought up. One, just so everybody knows, the TIDC does a couple of different things related to these public defender offices. One, as James alluded, was to plan the offices. We do planning studies for new public defenders. And we do generally use TIDC caseload guidelines as a measure. We have some standard staffing ratios that we use when it comes to recommending investigators, recommending social workers, recommending administrative personnel. I was not at TIDC when the study was done. In fact, James, I don't recall. I don't think a study exactly was done for your office. I know it was before I came to TIDC, but
I think,
does that sound right?
think Judge Ferguson called Jim Bethke and said, we have a need and it needs to happen now, I believe is the accurate statement of the history.
Worked with Edwin primarily on that, Jeff.
Yeah, gotcha. So, since then we have, as James had mentioned, I mean, we really have, I think, refined the way we help plan for these offices. Those planning studies are never prescriptive. It's really up to the counties. They can take it or leave it, or they can say I should say it's not really take it or leave it. They can adjust it. They can come back and say, we want 1 fewer attorney, or we want 2 more investigators, whatever it may be. There is no, to James's point too, there is no standard salary scale for rural defender offices across Texas. Our board's approach really has been to prize local control and to try to adjust it so that it meets local salary schedules for prosecutors. Sometimes, though, I should mention that sometimes those amounts aren't enough to attract attorneys. So I don't know that that's always the best measure. The last thing I would say, just to piggyback on what you're saying, James, that there is no question in my mind that this office is overloaded, that there's a need for additional attorneys, a need for additional staff. James, I think you and I have been talking about that for several years. We did add, my recollection, I think there was a grant request last year for 3 different positions from this office. One for an attorney, one for an investigator, one for a social worker. I believe all 3 of those were granted. But even with those filled, I think there may be a little bit of additional room. What I can't tell you off the top of my head, because I've not really looked at the math on this, I can't tell you precisely using, if, for instance, if we were to plan this office from scratch right now, how many staff would we recommend? I have no doubt in my mind it would be more than what we currently have. What I don't know is the exact number that we would need. And that's something, if it's helpful, I could have our staff look at. And I think that's the big thing on my end. I mean, like I said, I don't have an exact number, but undoubtedly this office needs more staff. The one question I have, I know there's a bill that would change district court jurisdictions. And I don't know if that would affect, and James and Judge Ferguson, you probably know better than I do, if that would affect coverage of this office or not. And again, that's assuming that it passes, which maybe it doesn't. So those are the things that I would add.
Right, I don't know either. I think I laid out the numbers per county of the number of cases we've got misdemeanor and felony. And so we've got some sense that Brewster County covers most of our open cases. And probably almost 50% of our open cases in the last 12 months come from Brewster County. And in the last 12 months, about just under a third have come from Hudspeth County. We have another problem that I think some of the judges there in the Western counties are aware of. There is an incredible backlog in the Western counties of non-indicted cases. When they get grand jury and they decide to show up and present those cases, every unindicted case could become a live case. And according to the schedule that we try and keep at the district court, we will, I don't know what we will do. So I believe we've had discussions before. I mentioned last time that it was difficult for me to hire the felony position at $100,000. That is still true. I gave you some indication of the only 2 applications we've had since Christmas on that position. In my report, one was a person who wanted to work part-time from Austin and was unqualified nonetheless. The other one was our former employee who is now effectively making more money than Paul. And the only 2 trials that she has are the 2 trials she had with us 5 years ago. And Paul now has about 18 felony jury trials. She has 2, they're over 4 years old, and she's effectively making more money than Paul's base salary, not taking into account the bonuses that y'all voted for at Christmas. Salary is an issue. One thing that I could do is decide that for the next couple of years, all I'm doing is training up people and hire multiple entry-level people and see who decides to stick around. Another thing would be to try and advertise the positions for a higher salary. And some of what has worked with other offices that I don't have time for is that their chiefs go out and actively poach from other offices. They show up at events and just walk up to people and say, you want to come work where we are. I don't have time to spend driving around the state, showing up and cold calling people in person. That has been effective for other offices. But right now, a lot of the public defenders at the felony level who are taking the jobs are being poached from other programs. That is what I expect will happen to Mr. Chambers sometime in the next 2 years. So that's where we're at. I believe, as I said in my report, that we need a pause on intakes. I believe that is politically the most difficult thing that I could say here today, because I believe that my value to the counties is in taking cases. My value to the counties is showing up. My value to the counties is moving forward. And I think in a very, very high quality way, I will take the moment to say that I believe that y'all get among the highest quality criminal representation of the state that you could get, and you're getting it on the cheap. So I believe that my office needs a break. Believe that I need to be able to take some time off. I believe that we need to be able to focus as is ethically required on the clients that we actually have. And that was the hardest thing for me to say to the county speaks has been my commitment from the beginning, is that we take every appointment, every court-appointed case, except for conflicts. And that is the value that we give to the counties. But at this point, I just don't think that we can do that for a period of time.
Does that conclude your remarks?
Yes, sir.
So county judges, I want to, and Jeff can jump in if he needs to here, but I want you to understand the way that the appointment wheel works when you have non-PDO cases. And of course, Mr. Ortiz can also jump in and share his experience as well. Technically, the wheel for appointment is supposed to be lawyers in the county who are willing to take and are qualified under the indigent defense plan to take certain degree cases from misdemeanor all the way to capital first degree felonies. Judge Udias, you have 0 lawyers in your county who can fulfill a single appointment of any level. Judge McKenzie, you have 0 lawyers in your county who can take any appointment from misdemeanor to first degree felony. Judge Evans, I think you have 1. Mr. Medley, I think, is the only one, right? Sandy Stewart, but I don't think she's taking appointments. She's not, so she's not available. So you've got 1 who's willing to do it. Judge Hennington, I don't know if you have any right now who would be willing to take appointments. We've always drawn from neighboring counties, but I think our available bar has fallen away to the point that I'm not aware of anyone in county right now. Mr. Chambers, you may know someone, but I don't. Who do you know that? No, we do have one. Shane O'Neill.
You have
Mr. O'Neill and Miss Balovich.
And Ms. Balovich, that's right.
Neither of them are qualified right now to take A-list cases, which are first and second degree cases.
Misdemeanor, state jail, and third degree.
Yes.
All right. In Presidio County, we have 1, I believe, which is Mr. Rodriguez. So that is the state of the district right now. We don't have anyone to take those appointments unless we can go to the neighboring counties, which I can do to pull people into the wheel. But the problem is you've heard all the neighboring counties of most of your counties. El Paso comes to Hudspeth and sometimes Culberson. We can sometimes pull from, who is it that's to your northeast? Judge Udias, is it Odessa? Or we don't know, it's Monahans?
Monahans.
Okay.
Pecos County.
People from there. And then Alpine, we can grab people from Fort Stockton if they're willing to come over. Part of the problem historically was we didn't pay them enough to make it worth their time. Hudspeth County, Judge McKenzie, when I took the bench, was paying $200 flat for a felony with no mileage. So they were spending more in gasoline to come to court than they were getting paid on those cases. I think we were at 300, Judge Udias, when I took the bench in Culberson County. And I think we were doing, it was less than $75 an hour because I was raising the other counties 75, 85, 95, trying to bring people up. And I now have a flat rate of $100 for any county per hour for anyone. If you do the math on these numbers, I know each of you has done that, my county judges here. You all know how much money you save by the public defender taking every case that we can assign them. Once you factor in the appeals from convictions and the jury trials, I think in Judge Hennington and Brewster County, in 1 year, we would have saved something like $60,000. I can't remember the exact number because it was a few years ago, but it was a massive savings for the county just in that 1 year. If we have to go back to those kinds of appointments, it's going to be tough. It's going to bog down your dockets. It's going to make it very difficult for us to comply with our constitutional and statutory requirements. It's going to start violating all kinds of things. It's going to put us below 90%, I would imagine, which means we lose our grants. If we lose our grants, we lose the public defender office, which means you will go back to 100% appointment of private counsel. So this is a dire situation that we are in. The interesting thing about Hudspeth County in particular is that Hudspeth County's docket, the numbers look similar to Brewster if you just look at raw numbers, but the type of case is dramatically different because most of the cases in Brewster County are non-drug cases. There's significant felonies that have a higher percentage of cases that go to trial. In Hudspeth County, the rate of cases going to trial is tiny. And Judge McKenzie, you and I talked about that the other day. I don't know if you've had a chance to look that up, but I'm imagining that percent is less than a fraction of a single percent that make it to actual contested jury trial in Hudspeth County. It is essentially a drug court. El Paso has a drug court that handles all of the drug cases consolidated that get filed across the different district courts in El Paso. We don't have that here. And one of in the discussions about adjusting the counties of the two different overlapping district courts, one of the big issues there was, in fact, whether Hudspeth County can continue to be served in the overlap we have now with our existing structure, because the numbers that they're getting on these drug cases, which are 90% of them pled down to a misdemeanor and a fine only. So they're quickly handled, but they require a lot of time, a lot of hand-holding, if that makes sense. They're not trial cases, but they do require attention. The question was whether they would be better served with the services coming out of El Paso County, such as the El Paso Public Defender, the drug court, the probation office, which comes out of El Paso and covers that county. This was part of it. It's also a significant cost savings if, in fact, and I didn't mention this to Judge McKenzie, but if, in fact, our public defender office can't take cases there anymore because they're overloaded, then the cost for Hudspeth County for appointments in the 394th goes through the roof. If, in fact, those appointments are going out of the 205th, which comes out of El Paso, the costs are dramatically less because the judge has overlapping jurisdiction in El Paso where all of the lawyers would be, and they can hold those hearings there. They can avoid the cost of travel. Judge McKenzie, I find it unlikely post-pandemic that you are going to be able to get court-appointed private lawyers to continue to travel to Hudspeth County without mileage reimbursement. My expectation is that will double or more the amount of money you spend on indigent defense in Hudspeth County, double or more, just by reimbursing them at the state reimbursement rate for travel in these kinds of cases. So my interpretation of what was happening and what is happening in Austin is an attempt to ensure that all 5 counties of far west Texas can continue to be served in the manner we are currently doing it, or better, depending on removing overlapping jurisdictions. So Culberson County would entirely come to the 394th instead of being split. Hudspeth County would entirely go to the 205th out of El Paso without being split. And then El Paso services would apply. Does everyone understand sort of what it is that Jeff was talking about, the pending legislation? That's what they're looking at. My evaluation when that was brought to me is that would allow me to better serve the 5 counties and the 205th to better serve Hudspeth County, and literally eliminating the overlap would have all 5 counties being better served, which is a rare thing when you're talking about a bill out of Austin, to make everybody better off with an additional passage of a bill. I don't know that that's going to pass. There is some opposition, and we don't yet know what the counties are going to do. I believe Hudspeth County is going to consider that tomorrow. Judge Radius, I don't know whether it's gone to the Commissioner's Court in Culberson County yet, but it would have to be soon.
It passed already.
All right. So
I'll send you a copy. I'll send your office a copy of the resolution. If that's okay.
Sure. Thank you, Judge.
You bet.
So we don't know what Hudspeth is going to do. We know there is some other resistance floating around. We don't know how much of it's based on reality or fear of what might be, but we don't yet know what's going to happen. If that passes, it would change the metrics of what we're trying to salvage here with this department. If it doesn't pass, we're going to have to reconvene, and we're going to have to take a really significant and hard look at what we do going forward. And there are many paths. One path goes off a cliff, another path goes into a tunnel. We don't have any idea which path we would choose, but those decisions will have to be made, and they'll have to be made by the 5 county judges in large part, because they're the ones who write the checks. So I want to lay that out there and just address what it was that Jeff mentioned. And I don't think we can really yet know what to do with this office and the different paths until we know what's happening with House Bill 4916 regarding Hudspeth and Culberson counties. Does anyone have any questions for me about that issue? All right, any questions for Mr. McDermott about the chief's report?
Mr. McDermott, you've done an incredible job. No doubt about it. A lot of your concerns regarding sheriffs and whatnot, I've heard it as well. And they're viable, trust me. And we must do anything and everything to sustain this office. And Culberson County will continue to move forward in support of this office, no matter what it takes. Let's move. I hope the other judges agree with what I have to say, with what I've said. And yes, salaries are important, especially in the rural settings, rural communities. I mean, we don't work for free. You all don't work for free. That's horrible with what y'all are going through, you know, and no vacation and whatnot, no time off. That's a lot of pressure, a lot of pressure. Mr. McDermott, I need you to call me as soon as this meeting is over, please. Okay?
Thank you. I will, Judge. I will, Judge.
But job well done. And I will support, I'm a supporter, huge supporter of this office. Okay?
Thank you, Judge.
You bet.
Thank you,
bet.
Judge Shadid.
You bet.
Anyone else, any other judges have any comments, or anyone else want to comment before we move on?
Yes, I do. And I'd sure like to get all our judges together that's within this district in order to let's see what we can do to make it viable to help the Far West Texas public defenders a better place, because what we're looking at, if it is not available for us, it's going to cost us way more money in the future and from now on that we're going to have to rely on our taxpayers. So then again, I do believe you're not going to see the justice prevail because of that. I believe we're going to have more dismissals. We're going to have less prosecutions. So I think it's a big conversation we needed to have immediately in order to help and make it more enticing for James's office to have attorneys present, to have the help he needs.
Thank you, Judge.
That's where that's my feelings.
All right, thanks, sir. Judge McKenzie, I see you've unmuted.
I have. So I feel like we're at the edge of this cliff here. I would invite anybody to come to court tomorrow. It is going to be on our agenda at 9 a.m. Mountain Standard Time. I suspect our sheriffs have banded. There are several already saying they're going to come to my court and that they are against this. I'm going to lay out the facts. That's where I am. But if any judge or somebody is able to come, I think that would be helpful.
Thank you, Judge.
Thank you, Judge. The church bells were ringing here. I know Judge Evans knows that, so I couldn't say anything there at the end. Anyone else want to speak at this time? All right, let's go back to our agenda here. We are looking to set our May 2023 meeting. We will know by then whether 4916 comes out of committee. I think that decision is going to be made this week, would be my guess, in Austin. Things are moving pretty quickly in Austin. So we should know by the end of the week, of course, with Hudspeth County being up in the air, interestingly, which, I think surprised us both under the circumstances. But nonetheless, if the commissioners court there votes no, I don't know what Austin will do. I would imagine that would go a long way towards having the bill die in committee. And as the bill dies, we hope that doesn't mean that this office dies, the PDO office. So we're hoping to keep that from happening. And Judge Evans, Judge Diaz, I appreciate your words of encouragement to that extent. It has done leaps and bounds advance for the quality of representation for indigent persons in our communities over where it was 10 to 15 years ago. And that has been in no small part thanks to the county judges of the 5 counties, your predecessors, and Judge Diaz, you yourself, in that role of taking the lead, as Culberson County has from the very first moment without hesitation. Other judges who are here, Judge Diaz has never said no. We came to him with this idea, and in the first meeting, he said yes. We came to him with the concept, and in the first meeting, he said yes. Every time he says yes. And the commissioner's court there has been incredibly supportive of our court and of this PDO. And we are all grateful to you for your leadership, Judge Diaz. So what are you looking for, James, for our May meeting? What time frame are you thinking?
2 things, Judge. We do need to talk about our ability to do intakes, but for the May meeting, the TIDC board meeting is usually around the first week of June, which would mean that we would need to have a grant put together if we were looking for changes and modifications at the beginning of the month. I would also say that if we were making modifications or additional grants, I'm going to ask at that meeting if some of the county judges can go up with me to Austin for that board meeting. And so that's something I want to ask the judges to keep in mind. For these board meetings, I have gone alone, and that's done the trick. It's done everything we needed to do. When there are big asks, often the chief public defender of other programs goes up with a group of the affected counties to make the pitch. And so I would like to talk about that. So I really believe that we need to do this at the beginning of May, possibly at the end of April. I put May there because that was what is our benchmark in the bylaws for an annual meeting, and it's because of these budgetary issues. We need to know before the counties go into budget cycles what our budget's going to be. So maybe as soon as the end of April. Excuse me, Judge, I'm sorry.
I think we need to mention to the county judges who may not be super familiar with our funding structure that the office was created. Initially, they were paying, I think, 100%, and then I think it dropped to 80%. And then we got some additional smaller grants at 100%, but they're intended to go down each year so that the county's participation increases accordingly. So
no, Judge, that's not anymore. That's not anymore.
That's not true anymore. So what do we have now?
This point, we're around an effective rate at 70% covered by the state of Texas.
All right.
So
makes it easy to know.
Right. So when I break out the county numbers based on the prior agreements between the counties are basically splitting up 30% of the cost of the office.
All right. So when we talk about adding employees, adding cost, adding staff, whatever that additional amount is for salaries, benefits, furniture, space, whatever it is, the counties are going to be splitting 30% of that among you in accordance with the pro rate that we've got. So keep that in mind. We're not asking for an authorization to hire 9 lawyers from Austin. A third, roughly slightly less than a third of anyone we add, all of their costs are going to be divided up among your counties. And that's why it's such an important request, and y'all need to really be on top of the numbers. Ms. McDermott, I think if we're going to have a meaningful meeting on that at the 1st of May, you've got a lot of work to do between now and then and I know without knowing what's going to happen with 4916, that makes it tough. I have no indication that it's going to make it out of committee. I think a lot of that will depend on Hudspeth County tomorrow. But if it does not come out, Hudspeth County is going to be looking at a significant cost because a lot of the new cases that are coming down the pipe are going to be coming out of your county. What y'all may or may not know is the arrest numbers are still very high and have been throughout the pandemic. But what happened is the indictment numbers plummeted. And for example, Judge McKenzie and I have talked about this, the indictment numbers in her county from the year pre-pandemic to 2021 dropped 90%. 90% drop. So they went from 270 to 27, basically, is what happened in their county. That doesn't mean those arrests weren't made and that those people aren't sitting there waiting to go to the grand jury. What it means is they haven't yet gone to the grand jury. And so that's what Mr. McDermott was referring to. And I know that Hudspeth County needs to keep that in mind tomorrow when they're having their ruminations and about what the actual impact is going to be. Changes are going to have to be made in order to keep serving Hudspeth County. And Judge, you and I have talked about that already. But this is not a simple matter of we'll just keep doing what we're doing rather than change. What we've been doing is no longer going to work. The pandemic has made sure of that. So changes are going to have to be made. The day that I have in the 1st of May is Cinco de Mayo. That's it. I'm in jury trial dockets, one thing after another, the first 2 weeks without a day off. So the only day I have is May the 5th. Does that work for any time that day that it works for everybody else I can make? What about you, Mr. McDermott? Are you in trial anywhere?
Let me look at my calendar, Judge.
I have a trial, I believe, in Culberson County that starts that Tuesday, but it's a 3-day trial, and we anticipate it being done on Thursday. We might want to set the PDO meeting in the afternoon if that day works for everybody, in case we have a spillover of deliberations. We would at least have the morning in Van Horn to let the jury keep doing its work.
Judge, that's a Friday, May 5th.
It is.
And I am available. I didn't know if we could maybe look at the end of April, the last week, or if your court is booked up.
I cannot do it that week.
Okay.
No chance.
Then I am available. Pleasure of the board.
I would ask you that week to make sure we have as much information as you can give us so that we can read in advance. With the entire universe of options at our disposal, we need some guidance before we get to the meeting so that the meeting can be fruitful and streamlined. So whatever information you are able to give us, even if it's piecemeal by email, we would welcome that.
Okay.
Judges, what about y'all as far as the afternoon of May the 5th? We lost Judge Hennington, looks like.
Judge Hennington had a meeting with Senator Blanco, and he left just a minute ago, but I will go by his office afterwards and check with him.
All right. Judge Evans, are you checking your calendar there, it looks like? Can't hear you, though.
I'm open over here in Hudspeth.
Okay.
Good to go here in Culberson.
All right.
It's me.
Ms. Moore, we couldn't hear you. You cut out on us there.
Jeff Davis County is fine. At 1 p.m. on the 5th.
Why don't we say 2 o'clock if that works for everybody in case we're still going in our trial?
Okay.
That'll be 3 hours if we need it. If things are needing that much attention.
And Ms. Moore says she's available.
All right.
And I will check with Judge Hennington and Judge Portillo, who could not be here today.
And Judge Dominguez as well. Mr. Ortiz, what about you?
I'm good on that Friday, Judge.
All right. We'll also have to check with TIDC and Ms. Lavoy, and I think Judge Hoffman as well. And let's pencil it in for 2 o'clock, May the 5th. I'm happy to do it remotely. I imagine there's a possibility I'll be in person in Culberson and I can Zoom from there with Judge Radius. Otherwise, I'm happy to do it remotely if everyone else is.
Judge, if you remember, we amended the bylaws last year to permit that for all meetings. 2 things to remember: Judge Hoffman's term ends on the board, so that needs to be an agenda item. As well as I believe that Ms. Moore has put in the chat suggesting that we do a 30-day reprieve on intake to give us a break. I believe that got an affirmative response from Judge Evans. I would ask that the reprieve be given until the next board meeting on May 5th.
So that would be a 30-day reprieve, no assignment of cases.
No assignment of new cases. My request is until the next board meeting on May 5th, which is, that is just over 30 days.
I wish Judge Dominguez were here for this discussion. He will have no idea of that.
I will send the minutes as soon as I've got them, and I will also email him and call him directly to talk to him about this.
Is this something that would take board approval for you to stop taking cases?
I believe, Judge, the statute requires me in my position as the chief to make the decision.
Okay.
And my decision was initially 6 months, but I believe that I can reevaluate that at the next board meeting with everybody.
Okay. I appreciate that information. Well, if you have the right to make that decision, I appreciate you making the decision just to get us through the next meeting. We do need to notify, obviously, Judge Dominguez very quickly because he may be appointing people today, and I'll have to let Lori know as well.
I will send a letter out today to him as well as try the other methods, but I believe he's in trial. So I'm not going to call him right now.
Sure. All right. Anyone else want to mention anything about the meeting that's coming up, the May setting? No? All right. Our last thing is public comment. Has anyone signed up for public comment, or is there anyone in the waiting room waiting to do so, Mr. McDermott?
There's nobody in the waiting room, and Judge, the agenda was published timely in Culberson County.
All right. That's true. I normally make that statement up front that the agenda was properly promulgated. It was posted as required by law, both timely and in the manner and location as required. So, all right, we have reached the bottom of our agenda. I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll move.
All right, we have a motion to adjourn by Judge Evans. We have reached the bottom of the agenda. No vote is necessary. We are adjourned.
Thank you, Judge.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thanks.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.